Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad you could be here. So today we're going to be talking about leadership. We're really going to be talking about how you lead leaders, and especially as you grow a company, it becomes really essential because what happens ultimately is you go from doing all the stuff to hiring people to do the stuff, and eventually those people will then get promoted, and there's leaders of teams, and you're going to need to lead those leaders amongst the organization and growth. There's a lot of times that your leadership is going to become important. And how do you lead leaders? So that's exactly what we're going to be diving in and talking about today. So Brandon Wilson is one of the world's best communicators and sought after executive consultants. His impact has helped leaders realize daring pursuits, from building college campuses to addressing global wealth disparities. But more than this, Brandon is a survivor of leadership sabotage. His bout and betrayal, theft, and deceit cost him more than $600,000 and threatened his livelihood in an unthinkable way. Brandon's experience has taught him that despite a leader's talent level, having an inability to survive leadership sabotage can stop anyone from realizing their full potential. Brandon, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me, my man. I'm looking forward to this content.
Yeah. So what happened? I mean, this is interesting. Tell me a little bit about this story. How did this cost you 600,000? What happened with this betrayal and theft?
Well, there are two types of leaders. I mean, there are leaders of things, and there are leaders of leaders, which is what we're ultimately going to talk about. And early in my career, I was a leader of things. I led a company. This is really important distinction here. People usually think that leading a company is leading leaders, but it's not. You meet a lot of vendors out there who have widgets that they sell or things that they provide people. You can be a subject matter expert where you are intently focused on delivering the thing, and it may be an excellent product, and what you focus on. And so early on, my communications agency was doing incredibly well. We were providing great strategies for leaders. We were providing them with great roadmaps for getting from A to B and achieving incredible things. And I said, hey, I'm ready to go to the next level. And I had not mastered the attributes we'll talk about today to be a leader of leader, or to have really high human intelligence, see beyond the things that I was comfortable managing. And so I said, listen, I'm going to take my company. We're going to buy other companies. We're going to buy other things to lead. And that's how we're going to grow. And in pursuing that, I met a person who knew that I did not have all of those attributes to be a leader's leader. And I lacked some of that intelligence. And as a result of it, he took advantage of it. And he put me in a position under the guise or feigning due diligence to essentially run his thing, to run his business, all under the guise of due diligence. My legal counsel saw the hustle, and they saw that I was being strung along, and that this person, we believe, never really wanted to sell the business at all, and just was stringing me along. But in this relationship, which quickly became an uneven relationship, one of the things that I did was take some bad business advice. And the bad business advice that I took was to set up a third entity for an eventual asset sale. And so we started putting our resources or our things of value into this third entity, and for an eventual sale. My lawyer said it was too premature to do that. I shouldn't be doing that. I thought I could survive the time frame, because at the end of this route, buying this business would add a couple of $1 million to my net worth. And I was like, hey man, it's worth the risk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Well, I got a call about a year and a half into the due diligence, quote, air quotes for those who are listening. And my lawyers called me to their office, and they did a check with the State Department and other folks, and that third entity never existed. And they were like, Brandon, where is your money going? And I was like, well, I don't know. And so we quickly found out that I was being hustled. I was being sabotaged. And we filed separation papers. We sent it over to him, and he refused to sign them. And then he showed himself as a bully. And my bully told me to my face that if I refused to give him any more money, that he would kill my wife.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was the most insane thing ever. And he said, "Did I tell you how I'm going to do it?" And he sort of gave the play-by-play. He said, "I'm going to have trumped up charges against you for white collar crimes. I'm going to call the folks down in he's a very connected guy, that the police department have you arrested. And my whole ruse is to get a mugshot of you so that I can blackball you from business and rob your household of the resources you need to thrive. And in doing so, embarrass your wife because all of her friends are going to think that she's married to a crook." And he said, "That's what I'm going to do." And he did it. And it was that experience that, let me say that I survived. I punched back. I punched my bully back. I had the resources, some incredible attorneys that showed the ruse that he was running. And I survived. But what that experience taught me is that, or led me to do, was speak to other leaders who were also leaders of things. And they found themselves over and over again in every conversation. I've learned that they found themselves in similar situations. 1 in every 3rd leader that I spoke to had been a victim of leadership sabotage. And some of them, unfortunately, didn't have the instincts or the resources needed to survive them. And to your point, Ty, I think going from being a leader of things to being a leader of leader is just the leap that we all need to take to start really mastering the discipline of protecting our leadership journey from the forces that seek to limit us.
Well, how do we do that? I mean, first of all, how do you look at and define a leader of things versus a leader of leaders?
Well, there are a couple of things. So, and I'll back up and speak anecdotally, and then I'll get very specific for your audience. The best leaders are system builders. I want to repeat that. The best leaders are system builders. The leaders who become the stuff of lore do something different within those systems. And I'll start with just the great leaders. Let me start with just the great leaders, and then I'll talk about the greatest of them all. And this is the definition. So the leader of things can be a great leader. Let me start. Can be a great leader because they build a system and then they place people in those systems to manage the system. So I want to be very clear about that. So you can be an expert or subject matter expert, and you'll be fine. You are a manager of you are a leader of a thing. Or you can build a system, which could be a company, a department, an institution, whatever. And then you put people in place to manage that system, but you're still a leader of things, even though you have people in place to manage that system. And here's the distinction. The phenomenal leaders, the leaders who become the stuff of lore, do something mildly or subtly different. I mean, it's just a little nuance that makes it all the difference in the world and catapult them to becoming leaders of leaders. The leaders of leaders have a penchant for not only building systems, but they identify leaders to manage within the systems that they build. Those people that they select and that they develop or that they put in place, they don't say manage this system. They say you can manage within this system. All I expect of you is that you, at the end of A, B, and C, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, that we have A, B, C, and D. Here are the keys to the Maserati. Just don't go beyond this street here. However you want to get to the end game, it's on you, buddy. Go. And that's essentially what the leaders of leaders do. They give people things to manage within. And there's a certain level of a certain set of attributes or values that those leaders of leaders have that the leaders of things don't. And
what are some of
those? Well,
separate the two.
Yeah, so the leaders of things have to be subject matter experts. And so they understand their craft in an incredible way. One of the things that the leader of things might be lacking, and these are, if you work at corporations, you'll start to see people like, yeah, that's right. The first thing that you want to develop in those people as they become leaders of leaders is an ability to manage people. And that's the first thing we say. You'll have an ability to manage people. I think that is a first step to running a marathon. What does that mean? Like I was actually speaking to some CEOs the other day. I said, what does management mean? Right? What does that mean? And what it really means is that you have an ability, a manager of things, and who is becoming a leader of leaders. You have an ability to take instruction and to give instruction. To become a leader of leader is not about instruction, more so than it is about challenging instruction. The greatest innovators of our time build systems, put people in place who break things. They break those systems. They break the components of those systems and figure out ways to make them operate more effectively and more efficiently. And so the first attribute of leaders is the ability to be defiant. This is really, really important in terms of leadership. It is something that's frowned upon because most of the world is leader of things. And they don't want you to break their systems. But the most phenomenal people who reach the level of becoming leaders of leaders are defiant. They challenge instruction. That's the first thing. I'll give you a great story about that. I had a conversation with Apple. I had recently helped Apple establish an organization that is dedicated to transforming the classroom using their technology. So Tim Cook was prepared to come to town, I guess in about a month, about 3 weeks. And they sat, and they're always ahead of the game. And they come to my office and they say, Brandon, what's next? What is next? And I said to them, what do we want to do? I mean, we're taking a classroom and taking it to the next level with your technology. And they said, yeah, what we think is next is A, B, and C. And I said, that's not enough. Because I'm now a leader of leaders. And so I have leaders around me. It's important that I not speak to what they do, but I challenge what they've been instructed to do. And I said, that's not enough. What you need to do, what I would suggest you do is instead of having a camp, whether it be a coding camp, a technology camp, why don't you have a coding and technology college campus? Why don't you, Apple, build an entire campus? And they looked at me as if I was from Mars. Now imagine Apple looking at somebody like they're from Mars. Well, I saw it, and it only lasted a moment, but I saw it. And now we're building a college campus together, because that first attribute is to be able to be confident enough and innovative enough and bold enough to dare challenge convention. So leaders of leaders must first be willing to challenge instruction. The second attribute that leaders of leaders need to have is to be able to clearly communicate the consequences of failure. This is really important. All of the great mentors in my life, and even all of the great leaders of our time, we call those people shapers. Now, whether they be Thomas Edison or Morgan Stanley, you go on the list, these folks are shapers. They understood and was able to clearly communicate how what they were doing would bear consequences on the world. Steve Jobs, an incredible shaper. And so that's the second attribute. And so let me stop here and unpack these two attributes, because this is precisely where leadership sabotage starts to take root. And so, which leads to my third point, which is leaders of leaders have to also be comfortable in dissent, be very comfortable navigating disagreement, which we'll talk about in a second. But the reason why I want to pause here and talk about sabotage, leadership sabotage, because something has happened in this transition from becoming a leader of things to becoming a leader of leaders. So you are a subject matter expert who knew how to do a thing well. You have ascended and somebody said, hey, I want you to now become a manager of people. You have now gotten the skills needed to creatively and constructively challenge instruction and put people in place to break those systems to make them better. And you've also gone to a place where you understand that their failure can have huge consequences on the gifts you offer the world. Let's keep in mind, though, that there's still people in place who manage the system that you are now instructing people to break. And this is creating conflict within your own team. It creates conflicts within your own department. It creates conflicts in your own ecosystems. And now if you're not the CEO is like, hey man, what is Ty doing down there? Why are people trying to trip Ty up? Because you're out to disrupt, to supplant comfort in order to pursue the benefit, give the world the benefit of your leadership. And people don't want that. And so to do those two things, challenge instruction, clearly communicate with urgency, the consequences of failure, and then be comfortable in disagreement. That third component is really, really important, because every leader who reaches the level of becoming leaders of leaders will ultimately face a limiting force that says, stop, you can't, you shouldn't, you're gonna fail. And you have to be able to overcome the activities that oftentimes follow that language.
That's really impactful. What about values? Do they have certain values, real leaders of leaders, that they kind of, value per se more than somebody that's not a leader of things?
Well, the answer to that, I'm gonna give an agnostic answer, and then I'll give my answer. So the answer is no. And the reason I say that is leadership is not something that's owned by the righteous. When just a really simple example is when Jesus walked the earth, he wasn't the only leader walking the earth. He was holy, and he was, part of the Trinity, and he was, he wasn't the only leader. Pontius Pilate was a leader too. They had very different value systems, but they were both leaders of leaders. And they were, and I often tell activists this too. You're not an activist because you chain yourself up to a tree. I mean, and say that we need better climate. You're not as much of you're not more of an activist than the person who says we need big coal. So the value distinction is not the defining point that says that you are a leader of leaders or not. Now, what I will share, now this is Brandon speaking now, that the most powerful weapon, there are two things, two powerful weapons for guarding yourself against leadership sabotage and protecting your ability to offer gifts to the world are two things. One of them is curating a very positive self-identity. And to do that, you have to encode in yourself a set of values, a set of principles that are unyielding. You have to be self-aware. You have to know what your vulnerabilities are. The reason I allowed myself to be hustled and sabotaged in the first place is because I did not understand that the effect that the lure of money could have on my faculties or my ability to make accurate decisions. I know that now. And so I have a different set of values now, value systems that allow me to lead in ways that protect my journey. The second skill is leading with integrity. And so leading with integrity is an incredibly powerful weapon to sabotage. When those people lie to you, call them out by using truth. Don't hide from them or put them in a corner and, no, say, hey, you, employee AB, come here. you just lied to me. Be called out and do it in front of everybody. And so that people know that truth is part of your value system that leads or fuels your integrity. So absolutely, it is something. Now, if you don't have integrity or if you don't have a positive self-identity, you will find yourself more of the spectrum of being a saboteur, where you are limiting other people, where you are rejecting growth, where you are not developing or evolving, where you are not innovating in very positive ways. But I'm not discounting people who want to do that. I mean, there are definitely leaders who want to do that. And they are leaders in their own right as well.
As a leader, how do you really, achieve like transformational impact to the leaders that you're leading?
Well, in my life, I'm glad you asked that. I've had some incredible mentors. Early in my career, I had a chance to work at a civil rights organization in my 20s, and my job in my 20s, I want to underscore that, was providing management consultancy to college presidents around the world. And so I would walk in the room. I have to really sort of command their respect pretty quickly, because I'm going to be giving them organization. And my instincts and my training helped me be successful in doing that. And so what it also did is unlocked a lot of mentors for me from coast to coast and in parts of Canada and all over the place. I had some great mentors in my life. And one mentor said to me something that I will never forget. Her name is Carolyn Johnson. She now runs a magazine called Diversity magazine, Diversity Inc. magazine. And I remember she told me that every leader should wake up each day committed to doing work that results in irreversible impact. And she sort of dragged out that word, irreversible. And I said, well, tell me more. And she started talking about politicians, or I had another mentor that I mentioned this to, and we started to break it down. We started to talk about politicians, where people say to be transformational, you have to put laws in place. Those laws are reversible. Like, that's reversible. Or that policy you put in place that you got your company to do, that's reversible. And a lot of leaders, they think that they've reached the Taj Mahal because they've changed the policy or because they've enacted a law. But to truly create legacy, which is why we sit in our chairs and why we call ourselves chief executives, is because we ultimately want to be able to show our grandkids, or have our grandkids show their grandkids, the thing that you help establish, the thing you impacted, the thing you put in place that lasts well beyond you. And when I get leaders to start thinking in those terms, it's a game changer. It changes the way they wake up that next morning, and it changes the penchant, their audacity to say to their chief executive or to their board chair or to their board, there is a better way to do this. Because they now understand that at the end of the day, to not have that thing that they could point to that nobody could undo creates a legacy that ultimately becomes the gift of their leadership that they allow nobody else, not even themselves, to rob the world of. Another, I talk about Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs was a leader of sabotage. His irreversible impact was not a phone or a computer. What his irreversible impact is, just as an example, if you're thinking about what is irreversible impact, his irreversible impact was changing the way that we engage with the world and how the world engages with us. And he was bent on it. He tapped a guy named John Scully to be the CEO of his company as he worked on the iMac. And Scully loved that position. He loved managing that thing called Apple, that thing. We go back to manager of things. So much so that he got the founder essentially ousted from his own company. And what happened in Steve Jobs' second act is what we're talking about right now. When he came back, he was now a master of protecting his leadership journey from sabotage. He literally selected people on his team. He curated a team of people who were willing to break things. He selected a group of people who were willing, who he knew believed in what his irreversible act could do. So he communicated the consequences of failure. If we fail, we will have a world that won't engage maximally with us, and vice versa. And he also understood that by having success, that he would be able to plant a seed that gives way to things that way outlives him. And Apple is the most valuable company today because he allowed himself, not because he woke up early, not because he was resilient, not any of those things. It was that plus his ability to protect what he was pursuing from sabotage. And that is a discipline that a lot of people don't talk about. And every leader who's becoming a leader of leaders will ultimately face that kind of limiting force. And he knew how to overcome it.
Brandon, great stuff today. And I'm sure everybody that's watching and listening wants to learn more. I mean, this is a skill that you really got to fine tune, and you've got to do the right things to be a leader of leaders instead of a leader of things. So what steps should we take to be able to learn more?
Well, to learn more, buy the book. The book is called Sabotage: Leadership That Overcomes Betrayal, Theft, and Deceit. Again, that's Sabotage: Leadership That Overcomes Betrayal, Theft, and Deceit. And inside of it are insights that helps leaders to fine-tune their skills for protecting their journeys from limiting forces. So you ultimately have a clear runway to offering the world the gifts of your leadership. It is on Amazon, but if you want to go direct and buy it an easy way without searching on Amazon, just go to brandonwilson.co. That's brandonwilson.co. You can book time with me. You can invite me to come speak to your organization. You can purchase the book there at brandonwilson.co.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, my man.
So everybody, if you're watching this in running an organization, even if you're starting a business, this becomes essential, because what happens, like I said, is as the business grows, you're going to be leading people, and you're going to have to lead people that become leaders of other people. So this is something you want to get right. It's important to the culture of the business. It's important to the values that the business has. It's just important to making sure that you have the outcome that you want to have, and you actually have a legacy that you're proud of. And that, as Brandon said, that you're really putting things in that are irreversible. You're really implementing and making significant changes, not just in your organization, but in the world. But we just scratched the surface here. There's so much stuff that sabotage dives into that we really haven't talked about. So make sure you grab this book. Go to brandonwilson.co. It's the easiest way. If you go to brandonwilson.co, you click one button, you go right to Amazon. And then I'm also going to put the link to Amazon on the show resources page for this podcast as well. So if you go to creditsuite.com/podcast, you locate this show, you can find the direct link there. But the easiest thing to do is go to brandonwilson.co and get this book, Sabotage: Leadership That Overcomes Betrayal, Theft, and Deceit. Phenomenal book. So make sure you go and grab it at brandonwilson.co. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.